And good evening. Welcome to the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. Today is July 15th, and hope you got your taxes in. We want to say thank you to David Steimle for deciding to join and share with us some great information that he's developed over his course of action in his IT career. And I'm looking forward to it. So, David, take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, remote information gathering with PowerShell. This is just something I kind of do on the regular. I am with enterprise packaging team for the United States Postal Service here in Raleigh. I started learning PowerShell about 6 years ago, um, thanks to a member of this team or this group who I didn't know was a member of this group, if he was. Started really working with PowerShell about 3 years ago, where it kind of became my job focus. I've been with this group maybe 2 years, not sure. I'm an SCCM packager. I specialize in custom script installations and detection methods, although now I'm a little more managerial. I play with Linux. I got 3 Raspberry Pis. My wife would love it if you wanted to take some away from me. And I'm a Dungeon Crawl Classic Road Crew judge. I have an annoying cat. All right. I'll leave that up for a second. The easiest way to find me is Twitter. I have my link to my webpage on there. That's just a QR code. Advance, please. There we go. All right. Yeah, I'm just DB Steimle on Twitter, davidsteimle.net. My Discord's right there. And the GitHub for what I'm talking about, some of it's out of date, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. Kind of an older version of this. So anyway, why do we care about remote data? You might not, but you might someday. So it's kind of cool to know about how to get it. You might need to get information from machines that you access or support, or maybe you just maybe you find yourself in a position where you need to get a hold of somebody else's information in a non-malicious way. Someone in your enterprise, right? And the best part is if you know how to get information remotely, you can get that programmatically from a lot of machines. And of course, bosses love data. All right, the 2 main tools are going to be, we're going to be talking about script blocks. You write script blocks all the time, even if you don't know it. Script blocks just code in between brackets. I like script blocks because they can make my code look a little cleaner. I can write a script block and then use our next command, invoke command, to kick that code off. It's especially good with when you're doing remote information. Cat, you gotta go. But it's helpful in general coding. So script blocks are kind of dumb functions, if you will, for now. I'm going fast, I think, but anyway, I'm sorry.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
All right. Invoke command is what makes your script blocks happen. And that's the mechanism for running your code remotely. Quick disclaimer, I'm using a lot of WMI examples, mostly because anybody here who's using Windows can make a WMI call that I'm making and probably get the same results as I do. WMI is not the best thing, but if we start talking about SIM instance, then we're talking about getting into remotes a whole different way. So I avoided that. I'm primarily using PowerShell 5.1 because Windows or PowerShell 7, of course, does not have WMI, at least not on my Linux boxes I use it on. I don't have WinRM environment, so I'm going to be doing everything locally, but you could include, anytime you see invoke command, you could put - computer name, and it would run the same way. Last thing is my self-deprecating disclaimer. I'm not a master of anything. These are just fun little tricks. All of these can be improved upon. Let's start slow. Just plain old invoke command, in case you're not familiar. And get into the right thing. See how slow my machine is? I almost bought a laptop for this presentation. All the way up. All right. So just plain old invoke command, script block. We're going to get the last boot up time.
We don't see your screen. We don't see that part. We still see the presentation.
Oh crap. Sorry.
Maybe you shared just the app, not the screen.
Oh, maybe. Crud.
Yeah, it looks like you just the app.
My bad. I should have.
The cheat is just stop sharing and then reshare the screen.
I do with my day, and I still don't get it right. All right, share.
Don't worry, we'll get Kevin to cut this part out. So.
All right. How's that? Are you seeing
Well,
my
it's your whole screen now? Yep.
All right, taskbar. There we go. So VS Code and our little screen over here with a lot of spoilers on it. So invoke command dash script block. You can run a little bit of code. We're just going to get the last boot time from my machine, right? So I rebooted yesterday at 5:41. Didn't help any. I'm still slow. If I had rights to your computer, I could do the same command, invoke command dash computer name, your computer, script block. I could get your last boot time. That's cool, but I'm probably going to stop using my PowerPoint. The real power is when you start variabilizing this stuff. So if I assign the results of last boot time to a variable, lots of us know this now, we essentially echoed WMI out. We got the same thing. And what we can do now, of course, is play with that date, make it more usable. You put that date into, you get 20 of those dates, you can't sort them. That's a sortable date. You can format normally like this one, year, month, day. Those are good dates, much better than day of the week. This is the default. So similarly, you can make your script block a variable. If I do that, then basically the same thing you're seeing over here, just not in brackets. And then last boot time can execute that. Get the good result. There we go. So let's go back and skip ahead a few, I think. Yeah, fine. All right. So that's fun, but how useful is it? What we kind of want to do is, if we're going to a machine, let's get a few things from it. So these are just a bunch of WMI queries. Called this script block 1. And then we're going to call our invoke command variable myQuery1. So myQuery1's kind of nice. Gives us our serial number, manufacturer, a bunch of stuff about the system, things that we might want to know.
So can I stop you there? I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that everybody here understands what is happening here. It's basically you're executing this code on the actual remote computer. So even if you pass this right now, you're just doing invoke command on your local computer. but you just took a whole bunch of chunk of code and you're doing all that processing on the remote computer. And so if you did computer name here, you would do it on a remote computer. And so you'd have the ability to do this across multiple computers in sequence, in series, as you defeat, and you get back these objects. And also, I
Right.
think one of the things that I don't think you mentioned, you probably will later, is that when you do it on a remote computer, you're going to get back a PS computer, a new property to that object when it comes back with a PS computer name.
Yes. Yeah. Um, and I may have forgotten that part because I've been trying to. My only enterprise is my enterprise, and I didn't want to share too much information about our systems. So um, anyway, a fun little trick. You'll notice this the system family equals null. So God, I skipped a whole bunch of stuff. All right, so object one in our script block. I'm going way too fast. Object one is an object we're making ourselves. Uh, it starts out as a blank object. We're going to pipe that through select object, and we're going to give it the names of the objects we want. So we're creating our own object. Select object gives us an empty object. So just there. So that's empty. Then we start filling it in. We start giving serial number the results of this WMI object call. Um, and then at the end, we return object one. Uh, sorry, very nervous. um, so you notice that I set system family to null. System family is not a real property at all in WMI. So what we are doing, this is a little trick from the guy I stole this code from. He had a lookup table that I decided to make into a REST API. So chassis type, we got the number back. So on my GitHub, I've got a JSON file that has his lookup table. This is all homework. I'm not going to go into it too much, just showing it to you. But I'm going to get my query system family equals chassis where index equals what my type was. Now I see that I'm a notebook. Anyway, that's just a sidebar.
That's actually cool. I had never thought about using GitHub just to in that way. Anyway, pretty neat, man.
Oh, thank you. All right. Let's see.
But I think I like the idea. You said just using GitHub, but even the idea of just reaching out to an external source for some other library. So even just grab that, if you don't need to reach out to GitHub, you could also reach out to, some file share or something to get that data.
Yes, and I do use invoke REST method against shares sometimes, and works just as well. It works a little nicer than get content JSON file convert from JSON. Sometimes it's a little cleaner. Plus, it's a few steps easier. And I will mention while I'm here before I skip over it again. You notice I'm doing that outside of the script block because if we're talking about running the script block against say 100, 1,000 machines, whoever owns this JSON file, whoever owns that server. Oh, am I still talking?
Yeah, you're doing good.
Okay, sorry, my mic just went crazy. Um, Whoever owns that server, they might not like us beating on them 1,000 times just to get the same data that we only needed to get once. So I'm doing that outside of my script block. So I'm doing it outside of my query essentially. In a more real sense, this call probably would have been up here somewhere instead of at the end. I just decide to throw it in at the last minute, as is my normal want. So that's a pretty good script block, but one of the problems is that we are getting what, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're getting 7 items. 1 call is from an API, but so 6 items. We're making 6 WMI calls, but we're only calling 5 classes. So we're making 1 call twice at least. And in this situation, that's not so bad. But if we are talking about a bunch of machines returning a lot of data, then why make that call twice? That costs you little something between processing power or just time. The fewer calls you can make, the better ultimately. Let's say it takes 2 seconds to query 1 machine, and you're querying 1,000 machines. That's a long time, right? So script block 2 is a little more advanced. This time we're going to get everything from those WMI objects. We're just going to spit it all back out and give it to us in my query. So my query 2, it's not as pretty. It's got more information. Problem is it's a little less useful. You see, we've got name, we've got name, we've got name, got name. If I do my query dot name, I get 5 responses. I don't have a lot of context. That's not a great thing for us. So let's get to my jokey part of my slideshow real quick. See how slow I am. There's the bit on getting that. What's wrong with script block 1? We talked about this, getting 6 items from 5 sources. My query 2 is not great because it's giving us a bunch of stuff that we don't have any context for. Here's a scenario: urgent email from your boss. And I have a typo. Stiemle, we need you to scan the field for these items. Why are you still reading this? Go. So these things that he's looking for, she's looking for: serial number, manufacturer, UUID, baseboard product. Those are all things that were in our first script block. Simple. Let's go get them, right? So you run your script block against the field, you go to lunch, you compile the data, you send it to them. I'm done. Let's go home. Another email. You didn't put the BIOS version in there, so get me that. Real quick, none of my current or former bosses, recently former bosses, talk to me this way, in case they're listening. All right. So we have script block 2, but that one's kind of ugly. I'll have to get the data, and then I'll have to figure out how to present it properly. So what do I need to do? We need to build a better script block. So we're going to do script block 3, which is making a better object come back to us. We're going to get all the data that we can, and then we're going to get a little more data to make it easier for us. We're going to put computer name at the top level because that's a key point of data. We're going to get last reboot since we know how to do it. We're going to get the PowerShell version because we love PowerShell, and we're going to get the last security update. And let me get out of there again. and go on to script block 3. So this is it's a little more complex. We're going to do a few things differently because we're getting ready to really hit the field. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make a generic list that I'm going to start storing my data in. Generic lists, if you're not familiar, they are well, I'm not even going to say they're better than arrays. If you would have been putting all this into an array, don't do it. And just to be fair, check this video out sometime when you have some time from PowerShell Saturday. Oh, come on, really?
Well, let's jump to the chase there.
So
The reason that you
slow.
want to say,
Yeah,
the reason
yeah.
you want to say that arrays probably are not as good is because they're a fixed size.
They are a fixed size, and every time you add to an array, you're rebuilding the array, and you get exponentially more trouble that way. So let me stop trying to show videos. We'll get some links in there, I'm sure. So a generic list lets you keep adding without the overhead of recreation, right? So we're going to make that out up first, and we're going to declare that it's a PS object list. Script block 3, we're going to have, I like response as my variable, as my object name, because it makes sense to me. Just like object 1, it's a new object, and we're going to give it these properties. Everything we're looking for, and then a little more, right? We're going to name our WMI properties after the class that we're grabbing, just so we can make it a little easier on the other side when we need to find things. If we know what class they're in, we know which sub property they're in. System family, again, since we're doing this from scratch, it's going to be the same thing with the rest method. I won't go over that. That's the way I'm doing it. And then computer name's all over the place in these WMI queries, but I do want to put it up front, and we're just going to use an existing property, something we already grabbed, Win32 BIOS PS computer name.
Hey, David, while you're getting this together, so there was a question Thomas
Okay.
Nielsen asked, don't you have to allow remoting on the target? And it's a good point.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that. So I should have mentioned that up front. If you need WinRM access, basically, and I'm lucky enough to have that predominantly. We have a few machines that are not WinRM compliant.
But to be fair, so you're right. However, Windows 8 and forward, it's on by default unless your org is actively turning it off. So remoting is something that you can leverage unless your company is working to shut that off. And that's a whole nother topic. But I mean, I would implore anybody to look into enabling remoting for the people that need to manage systems.
Yeah, and I believe I don't know a ton about the background, but I understand that WinRM is as safe, if not maybe a little safer than SSH, but I can't talk about that exactly. Not with any authority.
You are talking to the authority right now.
Okay.
He knows very much about it, so he can help guide you that.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, David.
Okay, sorry. So I already ran, while we were talking, I ran the invoke command against script block 3, and these are my results. Let me just run that chassis type again so we can see the whole thing like we were expecting it. And then finally, my data is our generic list. So I'm just going to do a my data dot add my query 3, and now my data equals that. If I do it again, just because I only have one set of data right now, if I do it again, we've got 2 iterations of this, right? So we can just keep adding on to this thing. Let's see. All right. So why'd I'm just going to leave it like this. Why'd we get all that data? Partly because we've already been asked for more data, and it's going to happen again. Secondly, we got pretty much every data point that we're interested in the context, and then a little more. We maybe spend a little more time on the front end. I forget how long that took for me to code. I think it's actually easier. But our runtimes between script block 2 and script block 3, which I haven't really shown, they're pretty similar because you're making a lot of the same calls. My one addendum to that is that getting the last KB, I used get hotfix, and get hotfix can take a while. It is a little notorious in my enterprise, at least in my former section of the enterprise, for hanging. So it can screw you up. So if you don't need it, don't get it. I'm just putting it in my code because it's fun.
I think one of the values there, or at least one of the takeaways that people should understand when doing some of this work, is that you are modularizing the code, and the objective is to put the code into a place where it can be reused. And the next part is to think that we're taking this code and we are sending it to, especially with remoting, we're sending it to the other side and letting the other side do all the processing, all the work, getting a bunch of data. Inside your script, you can actually, as you kind of see, you're building your own custom object at the very end or in the code so that you only send back the data that you care about. And so some of the things that I've seen other people do is do the remoting, but hey, you can also, get WMI that computer over there, but you're getting all that data back, all those pieces, all those parts, especially if you get WMI hotfix, you're getting every single hotfix, but do you really need it? Or do you want to let the remote computer do all that work, just select out the name and the hotfix number, and that's all you needed? Well, then send just those 2 pieces back, or, that kind of, it's supposed to get the entire object back. I think that's a really important thing to understand when you're dealing with some of this stuff, is that in this fashion, sometimes in the PowerShell world, you hear people talk about shift left or filter left. Well, that's a part of exactly what this is doing, is you're actually shifting all the way to the remote computer and letting that computer do all the work and do all the stuff. And then you just wait for it to come back and do all the, get you just the pieces you want. You're only sending the stuff across the wire that you want, and which is very important, especially when you do it at scale. And I know you guys are doing a bunch of stuff at scale, or at least, you're not doing, oh, I need 10 computers. No, I just did it across, 3,000 or more. And so that's a very important thing.
Right. And my enterprise, I didn't mention in the beginning, it kind of says that I'm in a big enterprise. My former segment was a little over 50,000 machines. Luckily, a common hardware platform for the most part. But I'm dealing with, I think, 155,000 right now. No commonality, and we've still got Windows 7, Windows 8.1 out there. So it's a lot of things to play with. I'm still writing PowerShell 2 at work, which is disturbing. It's very hard for being so low level, I guess, or so backwards. It's much harder. A lot of tricks in 5.1 that make things easier. But yeah, and that's part of why I didn't discuss GetSim, is that GetSim can do all of this stuff differently. It can kind of do its own reporting. But if I did need to get, say, registry responses or something else in this same script block, I think that would make another call for me. Anyway, I appreciate that, Phil. So the way I tend to do this is a simple loop. Should go back here. All right, systems in the field. There are two main ways. One is the way I do it, which is terrible, which is just looping through a bunch of systems. The problem with that is it's serial, which means I get information from laptop 1, and then it comes back to me. I get information from laptop 2, it comes back to me. 2 to 5 seconds every time. That starts adding up. If my loop breaks on laptop 3, that's all I got. If I'm home and let that thing run, then tough. You know, in the morning I got nothing. A harder for me, but faster option is to go threaded. I'm no good at this, so I don't want to talk about it. I don't know how to do it. It's an art. It is very much an art as well as a science. The guys who are good with it are pretty amazing with it. So I'm going to do a simple loop real quick. I think we all know what loops are. So I'll generally get a couple of machines. I get host names a lot of times from Tanium, so I got this count thing. I'll just convert that into a CSV or from CSV. So now systems, I got a bunch of computer names I can go to. I'm doing another generic list. I am just doing a systems.forEach, and then I'm result, which is my list, dot add. And instead of returning a variable like we were before, I'm just going to invoke the command right in that add. So I'm wrapping it as a variable so that it's nice and tidy. So I'm just invoking command PS item, computer name, script block 3. I'm not going to run that because I don't have laptop 1, 2, 5, or 9 on my network. But you can imagine how it, how that should work if you're familiar with loops. The kind of last part is, who are you getting data for? I'll show you what my data is, my list, right? If I convert to JSON, if I convert that to JSON, that's a ton of data, right? My boss does not want to see that, and some of it doesn't even make sense unless you really start digging down into it. So if the data is for me, I might convert to JSON, then just outfile it to a file that I can then import. If it's for one of you, I might send you that JSON file and tell you how to access it, what to expect, or if I'm really cool, I might make it an API that you can get, and then we don't have to share files. If I do this every week and you're expecting new data on Monday, if that API is up to date, then you've got my data without too many headaches. But what about the boss? Bosses want a flat table. They want the data they ask you for, and they're going to want more, so be flexible. The other part I know about bosses is sometimes they get asked for that data from somebody else. So they may be techies, they may be able to get it themselves, but they're asking you because they don't have time, and just give me what I want and be able to give me more if I need it. So, God, did I do anything on this? All right. So here I'm going to do, I made a new list called boss data. New generic list. This time I'm going to for each through my data. I'm going to look at each item. Not sure why for each method was not working for me, but I didn't have time to look at that. I'm basically doing the same thing I was doing in earlier script blocks, except that this time I've got an object that is going to be comprised of results from our previous objects. Dissolving out my data. So we're shrinking the data down to work for other people, right? Now, like we saw from the convert JSON, this is complicated. Where the heck is all this stuff? Fortunately, it's all up here. If we started here, we probably know where these things are if we knew to look for them anyway. But since we named our sub objects after our classes, we know that serial number is in property in 32 BIOS, as is manufacturer. We know where these things are because we knew to look for them in the right place. So if we go back down to where we're selecting data, computer name was top level, reboot top level. We're going to grab these items from Win32 BIOS. They wanted all these other things that they asked for. We're just kind of digging those out. Let's go ahead and run that. So now we got to, I mean, it's in list form instead of a flat form, but we're giving them basically what they wanted. They didn't ask for computer name, but what good is BIOS version if you don't have computer name, if it's an outlier, right? We can did I make two? Sorry. We do boss data convert to a
Convert. You're missing an N.
I do that in uninstall every day. I write install all the time. All right, it's too big for the screen, but right, this is a CSV we can send to them. They can open an Excel. They can make, they can make computer name green if they want to. They can make American Megatrends pink, whatever they want to do. You know how some people have with Excel. And the other benefit to this is if we discover that they actually wanted something else. They didn't tell us this time that they want security status. I just pulled security status out of the air because it was easy to find. Now boss data has got security status. We didn't have to do any more queries because we've got all this data. We just want to make sure we get the right data back to them.
I just want to say that
Yeah.
a bunch of people talking. I like how you got a bunch of data and you pulled it all back and you pulled it into like the JSON file and even the other objects, because it really gives you the ability to get more data than you need. And then when your boss then says, hey, give me this other, like, well, I got that too. And then you want other, well, I got that too. And you'd already pulled the data at once. And so kind of like what I was saying is that you pulled all that data back as one port, or just the parts that you potentially want. And you pulled it all now. And so when you need it later, here's more data. Or hopefully you don't have to go pull more data, but it's available for you now because you've done it ahead of time. And it's organized in a simple format, especially with like the WinBIOS serial number and manufacturer. It's all inside that extra object. So you can even pull out the parts you want, because I also saw you took the whole class. And so anything comes back in that class, it just gets thrown into that, subset object. And so I'm like, hey, it's easy for me to pull all those extra pieces because it's already there. And I didn't have to think about what else is there. It just gave me whatever was there. And so I don't have to pull that pieces. So I thought it was a really good benefit. And kudos to you. And in chat, I said, I'm stealing that code. So
So like just to that point, like this Win32 baseboard, this is me just converting it to JSON. We got all this data back. Do I need any of this, half of this? Who knows? But when I up in script block 1, when I'm making that single call to Windows baseboard, I'm getting all of this anyway. So why throw all of it away if I might need it? So I mean, you're making the call, you might as well return the data. You're not you're wasting more time by making the call twice or having to go back. God forbid you have to ping a million machines again to try and get one extra piece of data. So I'll kind of wrap this up. Things we didn't talk about. This is definitely a Ryan Leap trick that I learned. Test your connection. If you can't get to it, don't bother trying to authenticate, because sometimes Kerberos will take forever trying to talk to a machine that it can't even talk to. I like to do an error handling with my test connect, because sometimes I don't need 100% responses. I just need a lot of responses. So I'll try to catch around my test connection, and I will get out pretty fast.
How do you do that?
See if I've got an example of that. I thought I did. I meant to show you the.
Are you throwing that out if after it hasn't responded in time, or using time as your throw, or?
I'm using test connection to computer name. I'm doing a count of 1 generally, and error action is stop. Because I find I get a lot of red. I don't know if it's something about the way I do things, but if I can't connect to the machine at all, I wind up getting errors, like just like a regular ping where it says request timed out, or whatever. I'm getting a lot of red in PowerShell. So
Okay, so you're just throwing a test connection, which is a single ping. So give me a
yes,
single ping. If you can't ping it once, skip over it.
yes, yeah, it will definitely sit on a machine. Invoke command will sit on a machine trying to authenticate to it, and it can take a little more time. So yeah, just try, test connect, error action stop, catch, just keep going. Maybe it's a good idea to, that's what I was looking for.
Did I miss it, or did you talk about this code right here? This right here. I actually like this.
So this is something I did just the other day, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm talking about in 2 days. I should know all this. So I'm making a script block. I've got an Apex out in the field that we deployed to cat, and it failed. So I need to get these cat users back to the original version. So I'm trying to figure out who's got the old version, who's got the new version. If you don't know Apex, it's basically a phone application on your computer. Probably Candy Crush is an Apex if you've got that on Windows. So I'm just using get Apex. I'm looking for the old, I'm looking for the new. And then, yeah, so test block here, I'm doing try test connection. And if I get to it, I'm responding with true. So test block is true. Or test run is either true or false based on if test block is successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if test run is true, I'm going to note that I was able to ping the machine. So I set system ping equals true, and then I'm going to try and invoke command to it and run this script block. If I'm able to do that, I'm going to say that WinRM is true. WinRM is one of my, oh, see, I did, let me put this in. Real code. Or in
Props on your laptop names too, or the usernames.
Usernames, yeah. So yeah, so I got name, username, because these people are not T computer. So that's I'm making a property for if I was able to ping the machine, because if I got no results, then I'd not be able to ping that. If I can WinRM to it, then I'm going to note that, because then if these guys are empty, then I know it's not a failure. If true, true, empty, empty, then I know it's got neither of them, or I'm pretty sure it's got them. So script block, test block, we check and see if we can touch the machine. If we can ping it, we try and get in. We note that that's true. Then we try and get this result from the Apex, which my brain is try get result. Somehow I'm doing this wrong, I feel. Oh no, script block, checking for those versions. So I've run the script block on the remote machine. That's it. Grab. So I've run that script block. I try to run that script block. If I'm successful, then I'm either true that I've got this version, or I'm true that I've got that version, or I'm empty, right? So my resulting set is going to tell me what machines I could reach over the network, which ones I could actually touch, and then which, if any, have got which version, which ones need remediation, which ones are in great shape right now. And this code is on my GitHub also. I just threw this up there as an example. I think that was, unless you want to talk about that more, which I'm down for, but I think that's kind of it for it. One thing I like to do, but it's a little hard, is to record as you go. Let's say you are looking at 1,000 machines and you're maybe getting a flat set of results. If you can write that to a database, or if you want to write every object back to its own JSON file, that might be a good idea.
I think one of the things, at least one of the tricks that I've used in the past, and everybody who's still on the call, feel free to share some of the tricks you've done in the past, is I've on some of these, like doing things in mass, is I've used one script block to actually dump the data to an XML file, or to an object, which then gets written to a CLI XML onto the local machine. And then I have another script block that goes back behind it and then goes and gets that data. So if the script is running for long periods of time and could potentially error out, and I don't want to wait for it, I just want to get the data when it's there, and when it's not there, well, then just come back later for the data. And so I just dump the data to the local machine into an XML file, and then go get the XML and the data from the XML file later. And so that's what I've done in the past. It's like, it just basically, I had a script that basically get me the entire contents of the entire C drive, like give me all the files on the C drive, and that takes hours to run. But I didn't want to wait for every single machine. And so I ran it on the remote machine, and I just dumped all that data to a file, and then I got the file when the file was complete.
Yeah.
So just a trick.
Yeah, and I'm not good with XML, so I've not played with that one too much. I've used SQLite 3, and you can basically make a string out of your query and pipe it through SQLite, and it'll just keep running things into your database. Also on that same kind of note, record as you go. It might be a good idea, if you have access, to do this sort of thing from a server rather than from your own computer. Because guys like me in the packaging department will decide that you need a Java update and we need to reboot your computer at 2 in the morning, and then you are SOL. So it takes a change request to reboot a server generally, so we'll let that happen. Another thing that's kind of cool is I like to clear my variables. A lot of times, if you build your script block a little strangely, and I don't think it is, but if you get a positive response from laptop 12 and then response from laptop variables are still populated, that can skew your results. So I find to be a very good example of but first of all, I won't go to it, but go to Little John's error handling. It changed my life. That was a really great presentation. I was doing this on some machines about the time I wrote this thing, and I was getting a registry entry that was supposed to be a date, and the date did not exist on all the machines. So I was doing error like registry key or date was not entry, and I was getting January 0001 at midnight. Like, well, why do these machines all have the beginning of the millennium on them? I was casting the string I was expecting as a date. I was apparently getting a error code of 1, which I was then passing into turning into date time, which if you want, we can do that real quick. So that's where, I was getting all these machines that were showing that they were 2020 something years old, or that they had been acting. And my boss was a little concerned that my dates were that screwed up on a package I wrote. So had I handled that error better, I wouldn't have gotten those goofy dates. I think that's all I got. I can try and talk about some more things if you want. What's up?
Oh, that was good. I think I got a couple good, tidbits out of it, and certainly want to. I know some people were in the chat, mentioning some things, and so I think we can all got at least list a little bit something out of it, and that's really always a good thing. And at least that's the value of why we come to these groups, and we, the value is getting content out of it. And, we've all have a wide breadth of experience. We've been doing this a long time, and we've also been doing this just a short period of time. And so everybody picks up little tidbits as they go along. And I think a lot of people have gotten that. At least I have. So I speak to that. And so, we certainly want to open up the mics. And if you have a question, or if you want to mention anything, or at least think of anything that even, maybe David hasn't mentioned, or even things that you want to think that were valuable to you, or you might want to, steal / borrow / pilfer, feel free to mention that as well. So I think you did a good job, David. I appreciate your coming to the group and sharing.
Oh, I appreciate it.
All right, why don't you want me to stop the recording here?
Yeah, unless anybody has any questions, so we'll give it a couple seconds. Feel free to open up the mics if you want to ask any questions. If there are no other questions that David can answer, then we can stop recording.
I have a something I wanted to share. It's not a question for David, but so I have been coming around to the idea of invoke command more and more, and relying on remoting, because when you do that, you actually change the way you write code. And what I mean by that is, I find myself, when you write functions or write tools, when you start out and you build a tool, maybe you start out writing a tool and you write some query to be able to grab information. And then you have to say, well, how am I going to do that if I want to do it for multiple machines? And maybe a command has a parameter for a computer name or something like that. But generally speaking, when you do that, you end up in some sort of loop, where you do test connection. If the machine is on, then run something and then go to the next one. And that becomes very time consuming, because now you've just lined everything up to happen sequentially. And I think that's natural for people to sort of write code that way. And when you rely on invoke command, you can invoke to your own machine. So what you can do, and what David was highlighting earlier with the script block, is you can write everything in a script block, and then you can pass that script block to an invoke command statement at the end of your function. And the invoke command can run against the local machine. And what that does is it removes the performance bottleneck you have when you have multiple machines, because now you're saying, this is the code I want to run, but I'm just going to give this to invoke command. And invoke command, you figure out how to get to all these machines. Now, there's the whole idea of testing and making sure connections are alive. That's a different story. But you've taken away this idea that test a machine, it's on, run, go to the next machine, and go down the list iteratively. So I have been writing my code that way, where I write a block of code and then I pass that block to an invoke command, even if that's going to run against the local machine. And the cool thing about that I find that I didn't appreciate in the beginning was a lot of times when you output something and you have to format your output, and you need to take into account for that remote machine name. How do I get that into my output? Maybe I have to figure out how to query the machine, save it to a variable, put it in a select statement. That all goes away. Invoke does that all for you. So if you run a command and you invoke to yourself, the output that's going to come back is just going to be output. Now, if you're running against two machines and one of them is remote, invoke command is automatically going to append on the PS computer name variable for you. So I just find it makes it easier to write code, and the code that I write runs more efficiently because I've eliminated all the tools that I would normally use to connect to a machine and try to connect to a bunch of machines, because I'm not really doing it the most efficient way.
Yeah,
And
I think go ahead, David.
I was gonna say, I always notice that invoke command tells you what computer you ran it on, but I always forget about it, and I wind up getting the host name. But I do think it helps you write kind of cleaner code. And I did still make a little mistake on my talk about not making a WMI call twice. Anytime in that presentation that I wanted last boot time, I was making another call instead of getting it from an existing object, which I should have been doing. But yeah, I think thinking in script blocks makes you a little more efficient, or it helps you get there.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is that some people were mentioning in the chat was the idea of arguments. And so if you kind of like what Mike was saying, is the idea that, hey, you can do your testing, you can do your, like building of your script block itself by working with your own local machine. So you have a local machine. So I want to build the script, I want to run it a couple times, make sure I'm getting the data I'm looking for. But if you do all that data and you're getting it in the form that you can then pass in variables, but you can work with your local computer and you can do that. So that is one of the things that is valuable, is to pass in extra arguments into your script blocks themselves. And so I don't think you mentioned it. I didn't really see it. I was waiting for it, but there is a specific argument type. It's called using, is you can pass in using, or at least you can use the using and pass it back up the other way. And so there is a thing to play with that game. So it's certainly interesting and can be used. And once you start thinking in that scale, once you think in that mode of scripting in that fashion, here's my script block, here's my code, I'm going to pass it to the remote computer. The computer could be me, but at that point, then it's a very easy transition to move to 10 computers, to 100 computers, to 500 computers, to 50,000 computers. It's very easy to move to that. And so it just scales for free effectively.
And I didn't get into using because I'm not very good with it, but and I also didn't mention that if I say x equals 3 outside the script block and then I try calling x within the script block, that doesn't work, especially on a remote machine.
You did a good job there.
That would be where using would come in, right? Or an argument list.
Yeah.
yeah, to that same point is that, you didn't get into that at this point, but also I think you did a very good job in the regard is that you clearly defined what is possible with what you had, and you didn't really confuse everybody with adding to those pieces of, there's a ton of content out on the internet, and, we can even talk about after this meeting, some of those nuances in which playing with other parameters and other arguments and passing in data and passing out data and deserialized and serialized and all that fun stuff. And that is another rabbit hole that we don't need to go down. But to know that it's out there is if you're working with these kind of problems and you're going, why am I not getting the data I'm looking for? Or how do I get this kind of data? Well, know that it is possible. So be assured that it is possible, but it's just, this is how you do it. There's just, you got to go down a different road. We're not a different road, but go down that road, you'll find the answer and come back and continue on.
All right, so what I'm going to do here is we're going to say, first of all, let's say thank you to David for presenting tonight. I think you did a great job, David. Thank you for sharing the information with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Ciao, David.
I think you did
Good
an
job.
awesome job, and it looks like we've hit a little bit of lull here in the questions, so I'm going to stop our recording.